Time. It comes for all of us in the end, and that's one of the only things we can be sure of in life. But despite how absolute it is, every person perceives and reacts to it differently, like when it's Thursday but feels like a Sunday, or when a particular month flies by but the one directly after it takes what feels like a century just to get through. But even though it feels imperfect, order couldn't exist if we didn't have an idea of when to do things, or sometimes when to stop doing things. But there is one exception to the rule, one human being on this planet who doesn't seem to be governed by time at all. Playing certain positions in the NFL like offensive line, defensive line, running back, or linebacker are some of the most grueling and brutal career paths that exist, even despite the great compensation. In a sport where violent collisions are the standard, durability and capacity to stay on the field year after year is an asset that can't be ignored when evaluating a player's overall legacy once they decide to hang it up. So today, I want to jump the shark a little bit and talk about a player who is so durable and consistent that he hasn't even retired yet and doesn't seem to be considering it, which leads me to believe that he stumbled upon the key to the astral plane or something. The man I'm referring to is Frank Gore, and if he does have the secrets to the universe, there's no doubt that he's earned them. Despite his reputation as an immortal being who is now entering his 15th season in the NFL, Frank Gore's career has been a fascinating story of overcoming adversity and never giving up on what you love, clearing hurdle after hurdle that life's thrown at him to become one of the most legendary names in NFL lore. So to get an appreciation for how impressive Frank Gore's time in the NFL has been, let's journey back almost 2 decades ago to see how it all began. Frank Gore was born in 1983 into a difficult home life in Coconut Grove, Florida. His mother was gripped by drug addiction, and severe dyslexia in school stunted his progress and left him seemingly with no way to work towards his goals even before he had any. At one point, he was living along with 9 other family members in just a 2-bedroom home, with a deep desire to improve his life and the lives of those around him, but trying to square those dreams with reality seemed too good to be true. But for those who have a dream and the necessary work ethic to follow through on it, they find ways to make it happen, and that's exactly what Frank Gore was able to do through the game of football. His drive through high school earned him a scholarship to play running back at the University of Miami, in part choosing the Hurricanes to stay close to home in order to help his mother who was struggling with kidney disease. That Miami team was absolutely loaded as a roster, but they were especially exceptional at the running back position, with Gore backing up a future NFL star in Clinton Portis and another NFL great in redshirt freshman Willis McGahee upon his arrival in 2001. But even in a stacked depth chart, Gore exceeded expectations while hardly even trying. In a freshman season where the Canes obliterated all competition en route to a perfect national title run, Gore was no exception to that rule. He put up 562 yards and 5 touchdowns on just 62 carries, meaning he averaged 9.1 yards per attempt on the entire season. He was named a freshman All-American, and expectations were especially high coming into the 2002 season after he beat out Willis McGahee for the starting role heading into spring practices. But in a stroke of bad luck, he'd go down with a torn ACL just days before spring ball began, forcing him to sit out the entirety of the year as the Canes made another run all the way to the BCS championship before falling to Ohio State in double overtime. Gore came back the following year, and despite having to work through his ACL recovery, he still managed to amass 468 yards and 4 touchdowns through his first 5 games. But unbeknownst to him, his season would end right then and there, with yet another brutal ACL tear that set him out for the rest of his redshirt sophomore season. Gore was frustrated and beaten down. He had high hopes and a high stock looking towards the NFL draft, but now teams were worried if they'd even be able to utilize Gore for any time at all before he suffered a possible career-ending setback. But rather than just wallowing in his situation, he only focused on getting back on the field and proving his worth as a running back, and that's exactly what he did. After months of intense, painful rehab, Gore got back out on the field the following year and showed the NFL why he was worth taking a chance on, injury risk or not. He made it through a full season and put up solid enough numbers to make the jump to the NFL, where he'd be selected in the 3rd round by the San Francisco 49ers as the 6th running back off the board. Now that all the dust has settled on all those other running backs' careers, Gore stands alone with only 1,384 career yards behind every single one of those players combined. While he might have fallen in the draft due to injury concerns, Gore's career and legacy will tell a story of how he was the exact opposite in the NFL. He's played 210 games throughout his career so far, which is only 16 behind the all-time record held by Emmitt Smith, and I'm sure if he's able to stay healthy, he'd gladly add that to his long list of records. San Francisco was fortunate to have Gore fall into their lap, as his excellent field vision and stocky, tough-to-bring-down frame translated excellently into the NFL in his decade-long tenure with the team. Frank Gore might not have always been the flashiest or most explosive player, but one way or another he gets to that first down marker, and in the end, that's really all that matters. After easing into his rookie season, Gore put the NFL on notice in his second year, racking up a career-high 1,695 yards on just over 300 carries. Once he arrived on the scene though, he never intended to slow down that production. He posted over 1,000 rushing yards in 8 of his 10 seasons with the 49ers, becoming their all-time leading rusher in the process. When there was chaos in San Francisco between roster turnover and the coaching carousel, Gore held the organization together as one of the few constants and a veteran leader year after year. There isn't a particular attribute you can point to in Frank Gore that is head and shoulders above any running back in NFL history, but he took pride in mastery of each element of the game and did his job down after down without complaint. He's nicknamed the inconvenient truth for good reason, as he's been the most dependable back in recent memory. Able to find holes for chunk plays, lower his shoulder in short yardage situations, leak out of the backfield to move the chains as a receiver, or even be an absolute stud in pass protection, even though that's an underrated piece of every great back's game. He knows when to initiate contact and nearly always falls forward for extra yards, but he also knows when to pull his punches, which is a big part of why he's been able to stay in the game year after year at one of the most grueling positions since George W. Bush was still in office. Even after parting ways with the 49ers and signing with the Indianapolis Colts, Gore was a silent killer for their team, putting up 3 seasons of over 950 yards while over the age of 32. That's about when most other running backs are settling into analyst gigs or opening up a restaurant in their former team's city. But for Gore, playing in the NFL isn't just his career, it's his lifestyle. When you've overcome as much adversity in both your personal life and your career, time is just an obstacle to run through, and so far, it has yet to bring Frank Gore down. When people tell him he's too old or that his days are numbered, he just uses that as motivation to go out there and prove them wrong each and every season. I mean, even last year, behind the Dolphins' Swiss cheese offensive line, he managed to rack up 4.6 yards per carry and 10.3 yards per reception. He's got the durability of a cockroach, with even 2 ACL tears and 14 years of mileage in the NFL. But the insane thing is that he still doesn't believe his career is ending anytime soon. He currently sits behind Barry Sanders on the all-time rushing yards list with 14,748. That's good for the number 4 spot, but he only trails him by 521 yards, which is more than possible to achieve if he plays 1 or 2 more seasons in the league. Sure, age will catch up to him whether he trains like a 20-year-old or not, but with Gore's track record and limited injury history over the years, I think he just might stick around on 1-year contracts and continue to set records and gain even more respect for his perseverance if he were to do so. He just recently signed with the Buffalo Bills, and while the cold weather up there will be a huge challenge in terms of his day-to-day recovery, his change of pace to a struggling LaShawn McCoy should provide each other with support to lean on in Buffalo's young and untested offense. But now that he's chugged along to this point, I'm far more willing to bet on Frank Gore himself than the circumstances around him, because if you asked me how many years Frank Gore had left in the tank when he signed with the Colts 4 years ago, I probably would have given you a shrug and said maybe 2, and yet here we are 5 years later in his 15th training camp. He's become a shining example of not allowing your past adversity to define your ceiling. And by every measure, Gore has gone on to achieve far more than he was ever supposed to as a kid who had little more than just a dream in South Florida. While some may debate his Hall of Fame resume and ask if he was ever really in the top tier of running back talent in his prime, there's no doubt in my mind that Gore is the poster child for what the NFL is really all about. Carving yourself out a role in the highest level of athletics by using only your sheer will, and utilizing the physical gifts that you're given to improve the team around you regardless of whether that makes you unstoppable or not. But even if 2019 ends up as the final season for Frank Gore in the NFL, he's already proven to me and everyone else that even time didn't stand a chance against him.